In the previous chapters, we talked about the business model DNA, which is representing your specific business model mechanism with the metrics. And we talked about that you need to pick a business goal, at least for the current stage, ideally for stages within the next 3 to 5 years. In this chapter, I would love to combine both approaches and would love to show you how they are related. So let's look at your business model DNA. And let's imagine you want to achieve a specific goal, which might be getting profitable. So as you learned, getting profitable means you need to track the customer acquisition cost and the customer lifetime value. Let's start with the customer acquisition cost. If we look at your business model DNA, then only the metrics from the marketing and sales channels, as well as the conversion steps, normally impact the customer acquisition cost. That means normally the metrics for the revenue models are not impacting the customer acquisition cost. And additionally, not all metrics from the marketing and sales channels and conversion steps are impacting the customer acquisition costs in the same way. Some of them have big impact, others low impact, maybe others no impact. So it means we need to figure out, and I show you how in a few moments, you need to figure out what are the most important metrics impacting the customer acquisition cost. If we look at the customer lifetime value, the other goal metric for getting profitable, it's the other way around. So it's only impacted by the metrics of the revenue models in a normal business model. There are rare exceptions, but normally only these metrics are impacting the customer lifetime value. So the marketing and sales as well as the conversion step metrics have no impact. But again, not all business model metrics have the same impact on the customer lifetime value as others. So there might be again the ones which have big impact, low impact or no impact. Again, please figure out which metrics have the biggest impact. Because if you figure them out and you focus on them, you will improve the goal metric the fastest and in the most efficient way. That's why you need to know your key metrics. If you follow the goal, you want to grow as fast as you can, then potentially all metrics of your business model DNA might have impact. Again, not all of them in the same way. Again, you need to figure out which ones are the most important ones, so your key metrics. The question is, how do you find out what the key metrics are? There is a very simple methodology, a method, a tool, which I call the simple factor analysis, which you can do manually in an easy way. How does this work? It is working as follows. You start looking at each metric of your business model DNA and pick a value for that metric. It can be a random number, it can be a guess what the value might be. I recommend just to put the value 1 for each metric. And then based on your business model DNA, you calculate the goal metrics. So for example, as just an example, you might calculate that the customer acquisition cost might be 100, that the customer lifetime value might be 100, and that the growth rate is 100 new customers per month, for example. In the next step, you individually change each metric value. You increase the metric value by 10%. So let's start with the first one. Let's increase the value from 1 to 1.1. which is a 10% increase. And after you did that, you calculate the customer acquisition cost, the lifetime value, and the growth rate in number of new customers again. And then you check for each metric whether this 10% increase is changing the goal metrics a lot, not at all, or just a little bit. The idea is the metric changes. The idea is that the metrics which are changing the goal metrics the most are the most important ones. The ones which have no impact obviously have no impact. So obviously you are not looking at correlations within the metrics, but it's a very simple and fast way to figure out, at least roughly, and this is good enough, you figure out what your key metrics are. To give you a hint or an idea, a medium complex business model might have 50 to 60 metrics in the business model DNA, but the key metrics might be just 5, 7 or 10. So it's just a fraction of the whole metrics list. So please figure out what the key metrics are. So to sum it up, you have your business model DNA with the metrics representing exactly your business model mechanism. This is unique. This is like, as the name says, like a DNA. You need to figure out what metrics, which ones are the most important ones, which have the biggest impact on your business goals. These are your key metrics. Please identify them, and if you found them, please focus on them to reach your goal as fast and as efficient as you can. You can use this technique also the other way around. You can set a specific goal. Let's say you want to achieve 100 euros customer acquisition costs, and then you calculate backwards what value combinations of the metrics would support customer acquisition costs of 100 euros. If you find the combination which sounds realistic, it seems doable. If you do not find the combination, it seems more like sporty or maybe not possible at all. This is a kind of first risk analysis whether you might be able to achieve your goal or not. Another important thing is that there might be blocking metrics. That means there might be metrics blocking you from achieving your goal. So maybe there are metrics blocking you from lowering the customer acquisition cost or increasing the lifetime value. If you identify blocking metrics, especially if they have big impact, please try to get rid of them. What does this mean? It means you need to kick them out of your DNA. What does this mean exactly? It means that the metric is normally related to a specific marketing and sales channel, a specific conversion step, or a specific revenue model. So please replace that model, that channel, or this conversion step and replace it by something else. And the idea is that if you kick this blocking metrics out of the DNA and you replace it, that the replacing metrics are not blocking anymore. So this is the basis for doing a so-called pivot of your business model. You change your business model very fact-based in an early stage even. And please be aware of, you can even figure out which metrics have the biggest impact if you do not have any clue about the real values of your metrics. Because we just used the value 1, which is just more or less a random number and not representing the real values of the metrics. So it's so important for you to understand that even if you have no clue about the metric values, you can use this technique to figure out what are your key metrics. Yeah, another remark is, if we want to model a complete business model, you additionally need metrics for things like other operating expenses and or human resources which are not included in marketing and sales, and or even the financing activities, like you talk to investors and you get investments or loans or grants or whatever it might be. So in this chapter and the following chapters, we mainly focus on the core business model DNA, which is representing the core, which is the marketing and sales, the conversion steps, and the revenue models. No worries, we will take care of the other metrics if we talk about a whole financial plan, for example, in the very last chapter of this masterclass. So to sum it up, please figure out what are your key metrics which are impacting your business goals the most, and please focus on them and get rid of blocking metrics. To make it easier to understand, I would love to show you 2 examples. The first one is a B2C case. So there was a platform, a social platform for consumers, and the idea was that they acquired new users and customers via Facebook marketing with a advertisement banner and you clicked on it, and then you came to the website of that service, of that community, and then you had the chance to register for free forever, to use the basic service for free, and you could also use premium features with a subscription model which was paid monthly, and you could also cancel monthly. So let's look at the business model DNA for that simple B2C example. We would start with the acquisition channel, which is Facebook advertisement. What metrics would you use? We would start with the resource metrics, which is in this case the budget. So the budget was 1,000 euros per month. That's it with the resource metrics. Let's talk about the performance metrics, which would be the cost per click price, which was in reality 86 cents. Make it easier to understand and to calculate. Let's say it's €1. That's it with the marketing and sales metrics. Let's continue with the conversion steps. So the first conversion step was visiting the website to registering for free. There is a conversion rate which was 5% in this case. And there will be a second conversion rate because after getting a free user, you could decide for the premium service. So there's another conversion rate which was 10%. So 10% of the free users started to be subscribers. That's it with the conversion steps. Now let's talk about the revenue model. The revenue model is a subscription model, so we would use the lifetime, what was the average subscription duration so far, which was in this case 3.5 months. So some people cancelled after 3 months, some after 1 month, some after 6 months, whatever. So on average it was 3.5 months. The next metric would be what's the subscription fee per month, which was €8.99 including VAT taxes. So let's say it's €9. And the next metric, the last one, would say what's the margin within this price. That's the business model DNA for this simple example. So we have the budget, the cost per click, the 2 conversion rates, and the 3 metrics for the revenue model. So based on the business model DNA, we could calculate the business goal metrics. So I asked the team, what's your goal? They told me getting profitable, so we measure the business goals, customer acquisition cost, as well as lifetime value as metrics. So let's do the calculation for customer acquisition cost. So you pay €1 per click for getting a website visitor via Facebook marketing. Then there was a chance of 5% that you subscribe for free usage. So that means 5% is each 20th visitor. So you pay for each visitor €1. You have in total €20 costs for a free registration. This is not customer acquisition cost, this is user acquisition cost because the users are not paying. So we need to take into account the next conversion rate, which is 10%. So 10% of the free users are subscribing. So 10 times €20, it's €200. So the customer acquisition cost is 200. Imagine what this means. You pay €200 that someone is starting a subscription. Let's look at the customer lifetime value. People stay on average 3.5 months and the margin per month is €5. 3.5 months times 5 is €17.50. That's the customer lifetime value. What do we learn looking at this example? First of all, we see the business model DNA for that example. Second, we see what the goal metrics, customer acquisition cost and lifetime value are looking like. And obviously there will be a problem because they pay €200 to get a subscriber and they just earn €17.50. So there's a problem if they want to get profitable. The next thing we can do with this example is I can show you how you use this simple factor analysis to figure out what metrics are important and which ones are not for your goal. So let's start the simple factor analysis. You remember we need to start with the first metric, let's say it's the budget, and we increase the value by 10%. So we increase the budget from 1,000 euros to 1,100. And we do the calculation again for customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. And if you look at it, it will not change the customer acquisition cost at all. This is maybe surprising, but at the end, you might get more visitors on your website, but you pay the same amount of money for a free user as well as a paying customer. So that means the budget has no impact on the customer acquisition cost in this case. Let's look at the second metric, which is the cost per click price. We increase the price from €1 to €1.10 and do the calculation again. And then the customer acquisition cost will be €220 and the lifetime value still stays with €17.50. That means a 10% increase of the cost per click price will increase the customer acquisition cost by 10% as well. That means the customer acquisition cost is impacted by the cost per click price. So if you continue doing that for all the metrics, you will figure out which ones have an impact on the customer acquisition cost, which ones have an impact on the customer lifetime value, and more or less interesting would be which ones have the biggest impact and which ones have no impact. You can also use this example to play around a little bit with your metrics and with your scenarios. You could ask questions or could define what-if scenarios like what happens if the budget would be 5,000? What would be if the cost per click price would be €2? You can ask questions like what would happen if we increase the conversion rate A or B? What happens if we could increase the price, and so on and so forth. It's not about forecasting the future, it's just getting to know your business model in more detail and figuring out what metrics have impact, which ones are not, and how different scenarios should and could look like. The second example is about a B2B case. In this example, there was a project management tool which was offered as a software as a service in the internet. So the customers had been small to medium-sized companies and they subscribed here that their employees could use the software for managing their projects. The idea was that someone in the founders team approached the potential company clients via phone, so it's direct sales. And the salesperson tried to convince the potential clients to check out a free trial version for free for 1 month. And afterwards, they had to decide whether they subscribe for basic, a premium, and a professional subscription plan. And most of the plans had been yearly or annual plans. So payment was monthly, but the contract was for 1 year. So let's check out what is the business model DNA for that example. Let's start again with the acquisition channels. We want to model direct sales. We start with the resources metrics. In this case, we would start with how many full-time employees are doing sales here. In this case, just 1 person. The next resources metric would be what's the salary for a full-time person per month. In this case, €4,000. Now we talk about the performance metrics for this direct sales channel, and we could use how many new companies, so first contacts, can be done per month per salesperson, which was in this case 200. That's it with the acquisition channel metrics. Let's talk about the conversion steps. Not everyone was happy after they got the call from the sales guy. The success rate, conversion rate, was 5%. So 5% of the companies started the free trial version for 1 month for free. And then there's a second conversion rate, because after the free trial period, there was a rate from 10% subscribing for either basic, premium, or professional. So that are the conversion steps. Now we model the subscription plan. I just combine all of the three plans to one average plan, and we would use the following metrics. We would say, how long do people stay before they cancel? This was at least 1 year because they had annual contracts. So the average lifetime is at least 12 months. So they couldn't know because the service was not out there for longer than 1 year. So they did not know whether people extend the subscription or not. So at least 12 months. The average subscription fee was 149 euros per month, and the margin, let's make it easy, was about 100 euro per month. So that's the business model DNA for that example. We have the number of full-time employees, we have the salary, we have the number of new contacts per month, we have the 2 conversion rates, and the 3 metrics for the revenue model subscription plan. So I asked the team, what's your goal? They told me they want to get profitable, so we calculate the customer acquisition cost and the lifetime value. How to calculate the customer acquisition cost in this case? So you have one sales guy and the salary is 4,000 euros, and this person can call 200 new companies per month. So 4,000 divided by 200 is 20. So per call you need to pay 20 euros. But then you just have a call, so the conversion rate to free trial was 5%, so times 20, so you pay for a free trial version 400 euros. This is user acquisition cost or free trial acquisition cost, but unfortunately not yet the customer acquisition cost. To calculate the customer acquisition cost, we need to take into account the other conversion rate, that 10% of the free trial users are converting towards the subscription model. So 400 times 10 is 4,000 euros. In the other way around, this sales guy is doing 1 deal per month. Customer acquisition costs 4,000 euros. So you pay 4,000 euros to get 1 subscription running. Let's continue with the customer lifetime value. People stay at least 12 months times 100 euro. Margin is at least 1,200 euros customer lifetime value. You don't know whether it's more, but at least. What do we learn besides how the business model DNA looks like for this example? We see here how to calculate, again, the goal metrics, customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. And again, there is a problem. You pay more, much more than you earn. So if they want to get profitable, at the moment, it does not look that good. So what else can we do with this example? We can start again to do this simple factor analysis. We could start with the number of full-time employees for sales and would increase the number from 1 to 1.1, 10% increase. And if you do the calculation again, you will see the customer acquisition cost stays the same, stays 4,000 euros, and the lifetime value stays the same as well. So the number of full-time people in sales have no impact on the customer acquisition cost and no impact on the lifetime value. So you might get more free trials and more paying customers, but the customer acquisition cost stays the same. So if we look at the salary, we have 4,000 euros increased by 10% is 4,400. And if you do the calculation again, you have customer acquisition cost of 4,400 and the lifetime value stays the same. So this means the salary of this salesperson has a big impact on the customer acquisition cost. What you also can do with this example is you can play around again with your metrics and play around with different scenarios or what if scenarios. What does this mean? You could, for example, try to model this case that you send your salesperson to a sales training and hopefully the sales skills will improve. So maybe the conversion rate from 5% go up to 10%. This would directly mean that the customer acquisition cost go down from 4,000 to 2,000. Or let's imagine you would be able to convince customers to sign a 2 years contract and then they would stay at least 2 years, and then the customer lifetime value for these people, for these customers, would be 2,400. Question is whether the sales training is working. Question is whether potential customers might sign a 2 years contract. You need to check out, but this is a what-if scenario, and you would find out what the results and effects would be. Again, you can't forecast the future, but it's so helpful to play around with your metrics to get a better feeling for your business model.